Chris, you moved over there.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our October 31st, 2023 9 a.m. board meeting. Happy Halloween to everybody out there. I just have pumpkins. I see we've got some orange. No other costumes other than all the suits. Maybe that's a costume.
Very scared.
So, thank you all for being here today. We're going to get started we've got a busy schedule, so we want to go ahead and get started. Let the record reflect that all 5 commissioners are present. Commissioner French is on Zoom. Chandra Fox, I believe, is going to kick us off.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Zooming in today. I'm working from home. My puppy had surgery yesterday, so I'm home making sure he's doing okay. So anyway, again, lots of work continuing. We have received the signed contract from Salvation Army for the disaster case management. That's with Heather in contracts right now, so you all will be seeing that next week for your signatures. We're working on completing the scope of work for the debris clearance. I just am waiting on concurrence on a couple of things in the scope of work from Ecology and LNI. Other than that, we're just kind of holding our own, continuing to make contact with all of the folks. We are starting to see some people come forward who originally thought that they were not going to be interested in help. They're thinking that maybe now they do need help. So we're seeing a little bit of an uptick in intake again, but that's not surprising. That's kind of expected. And then now that we have the signed contract from Salvation Army, they'll be starting to connect directly with folks. So good work going on there. And then we're continuing to, as I said, work on the debris clearance contracts, and we'll hopefully be getting those done next week.
Great. Any Commissioner French?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Chandra, I've received a couple calls now from individuals that have indicated that their insurance companies are not settling up with them, and we're wondering, where do they go? And my first suggestion was that they go to the insurance commissioner, and they said, we've done that. And then I said, then go to the state attorney general's office for the fraud division, because I think that might fall into that category. I don't know. I yield to the wisdom of Mr. Jordan in terms of, is that the right place to send them? But are you hearing anything like this? And what is your recommendation or advice to these people?
So yes, we are hearing from several folks who are struggling with their insurance carriers. The information that we've been given is to have them go directly to the office of the insurance commissioner, and the OIC is supposed to be carrying the torch for them in the disputes with their carriers. But beyond that, I don't have any additional information, no.
Okay, Mr. Jordan.
I think the division in the Attorney General's office would be the Consumer Protection Division. And so
Okay.
if you Google Attorney General Consumer Protection, they should see a phone number and contact information on the website.
Okay, great. Thank you for the suggestion.
Any other questions for Chandra? Okay, Chandra, I've got a question. I had somebody talking about, remember there was the group up in Elk who was wanting to do the Connex boxes, and that we're having issues getting that through our permitting process. Have you heard anything on that?
At our meeting on Thursday evening, it was reported that they had reached agreement with the permitting on that.
Okay.
So yeah, that project is moving forward, and they reported on Thursday night that the building department is okay with it. Whatever language changes they needed were done.
Okay, thank you. It was probably last Thursday. I was at a meeting that I was hearing that. So, Okay, good to know and good to hear.
Yeah, from what I understand, it centered around the insulation, spray-in foam insulation as opposed to your traditional kind of roll-in, insulation. And it was kind of the rating of the spray-in foam, I guess. They needed to kind of show the rating of spray-in foam and how that correlated to sort of what we have in our code. So that was sort of the hiccup they were working on.
Okay, very good. Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions? Not seeing any others. Thank you, Chandra.
You bet. Thank you.
Okay. So I was gonna give us some extra time with Mr. Crowder, so.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
If you wanna go ahead and come on up, and I know we've got your budget presentation to start with.
Yes, ma'am. Well, we have the budget presentation loaded, and good morning, Madam Chair, County Commissioners. I'd just like to make a couple of really high-level comments, and then I'll turn it over to Rob, and he can run through the presentation. And if you have any questions, please ask during the presentation. We're having a good year so far this year. We are at about 4% above our 2019 prior record level with regard to passenger enplanements. So the numbers overall are looking very positive. Our approach to the 2024 budget, however, is very conservative. Given some of the uncertainties with rising interest rates, will consumers continue to travel through those types of rate increases and other potential global shocks to the economy? So when we put together our budget and discussed it with and had it adopted by the airport board, we basically are taking a flat outlook for 2024 in terms of activity. So wanted to make sure that the commissioners understand we're doing well, but we're being very conservative when it comes to the overall budget. So with that, I'll turn it over to Rob, and Rob can run through the slides.
Thank you, Larry. Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Appreciate your time today very much. So I know the slide deck, I think everybody's probably looked at it on there, so I'll keep it very high level, keep it brief. If you do have any questions as I'm going through, please let me know. Happy to answer any questions that folks may have on it. I think the first thing that I'll start off by saying is just that the airport is not asking the county for any funds for 2024. So we are financially self-sufficient. That is a goal of airports as a whole, especially at Spokane. We take pride in that. And so funds come from the revenues that go to our operating expenses and capital come from system users only on there. So it's a really key piece for airports in terms of that. We'll go through all of the information on your slide deck or the slide right in front of you right now in terms of operating revenues and capital. Those are just some of our major operating revenues that we have at the airport on the top section there for us. On the bottom section, we'll go through it a little bit more is capital program. As Larry said, he talked about a little bit about the flat outlook in terms of passenger activity. Can't necessarily say that for construction activity, right? We are in this period of heavy investment into the airport. And so we'll go through a little bit about that as well, about our capital program that we have at the airport. If you could advance to the next slide. Thank you. So this is just a recap of our activity. And really there's really 2 points to this. On the left-hand side is our passengers. So what Larry talked about in terms of enplanements. That's really a key driver for us at the airport in terms of identifying that activity for us. On the right-hand side is our landed weight, which is a key metric that drives operating revenue on behalf of the airport. We are trending toward a record year in 2023, as Larry mentioned. We might soften just a little bit, so we figure just a little around 3% above our record year of 2019 for enplanement activity. And then we have the flat flat outlook for 2024 in terms of that. So we'll be under about 2.1 million enplanements is what we're forecasting right now. That would be the record year if we hold true for 2023. That is what we're forecasting for 24 as well. Landed weight on the right-hand side, pretty similar in terms of that outlook, flat compared to what we are forecasting for 2023. Just a slight uptick in cargo activity that we have there in terms of the landed weight for cargo activity.
So before you leave that slide, Rob, just 2 kind of things with regard to passengers and landed weight. One is we're seeing this phenomenon that we have coined a term in the industry called bleisure travel. So it's this mixture of business and leisure travel. So if somebody has a conference or they have some kind of a business commitment, they're tacking on maybe a few extra days, maybe taking family with them and enjoying a longer stay. So that is an interesting dynamic. The business travel hasn't completely come back yet. It is starting to show signs of coming back, but certainly not yet at the kind of pre-pandemic levels that we saw in our record year of 2019. On the landed weight side, the trend, because primarily due to economics and staffing, the airlines have basically converted to larger aircraft flying fewer frequencies. As you know, this year, Alaska accelerated the retirement of the Q400 turboprops, and that was for a variety of reasons. They were very high maintenance costs. They were very difficult to staff. And so they accelerated the retirement of those airframes. As a result, we see fewer frequencies, but we have been backfilled with larger aircraft. And so we will see landed weight increase because these larger aircraft obviously weigh more, so the landed weight is going to continue to go up. And there is not as much of a correlation as you would think about landed weight going up and passenger activity going up. So we'll see how the load factors look into the next year and see how things go with the national and regional economy. But those are just two dynamics I wanted to mention regarding the KPIs that Rob's covering.
Very good. Thank you, Larry. If we could advance to the next slide. This one, really a couple different points on this one. On the right-hand side is operating revenues and expenses. The green essentially is our inflows, the reds are our outflows. So that's essentially those revenue drivers that you saw on that first slide. So our parking, our landed weight, our airfield, renting space in the terminal from airlines are in the green, and that flows down. On the red is our outflows. That's essentially our operating expenditures for airfield, the terminal, parking facilities, those types of things. What ends up happening on the side, it ends up having an operating income or cash flow in terms of what goes into the airport. That goes for really a couple different purposes. One, to maintain our operating reserves. It's a really critical piece for us in terms of operating reserves for it, but also helps fund some capital programs as well. On the left-hand side where it says non-operating, those are just restricted funds that we have there. And that goes to specific capital expenditures that we have for projects throughout the year. And so we put those on a non-operating side just because those are restricted funds. They can't be used for your daily operating expenditures, only for very specific purposes on that side. We'll go through a little bit more detail on the capital side in about 2 slides, I think, for now. So if we could advance to the next one, please. And so this is just our highlights in terms of our operating revenues for 2024. So we're budgeting operating revenues of $57.3 million. It's about a 13% increase over what we budgeted for 2023. One of those I want to touch base on, let you know, is that we are going to increase parking rates in our facilities in 2024. That will take place January 1st is what we're proposing. And there's a couple different parking products that we have out there. We have the garage, we have the outside lots, and we have essentially our economy or our shuttle. The shuttle lots, they have that lowest price one we have. We're not going to increase that rate. We still want to have that as that low price option for folks that have the longer stays on there, the week plus kind of stays. So we're not increasing rates for the economy. The outside lot, we're just going to take it from $8 to $9 per day. And the garage, we're going to go from $12 per day up to $15 per day. Part of that is going to be, it's partly related to a couple different things. One is demand management. So at certain times, we are closing parking garage. That happened more frequently lately, where in a midweek, a Monday and a Tuesday, parking garage will be full. So part of that is a little bit of demand management on there. The other piece, as we'll get into a little bit later, is going to be our debt service. And so we likely will issue bonds in 2024 with the county on there for the construction of Concourse C Trex program that we have. So part of that will also help to offset some of the debt service as well as our capital program overall. So those are some of the factors and the decisions we made in terms of proposing a rate increase in the garage.
This is the first rate increase since.
Since 22. And even prior to that, with the pandemic, we had actually dropped rates. And so the rate that we are at now essentially is the rate that I think was 2017 on there. So we've been really stagnant since about 2017 on that rate. So we felt it was time now with the demand we're seeing as well as our capital program and debt service that we have forecasted in 24.
Some of the pressure on the garage is because of the closure of the C lot right now, because we're reconstructing part of it and then adding about 468, something like that, 470 spaces. And so we are anticipating that project will be done just prior to the holidays here soon. And that will take a little bit of pressure off of the garage, we think, but we don't know for sure. And because the price is very attractive, particularly in the wintertime, we would like to use that as some demand management so that we can hopefully have some additional capacity available in the garage for that shorter term parking customer.
The next bullet on there is our operating expenditures. So we are budgeting 42 million for operating expenditures. That is a 5.4% increase over 2023. Mostly relates to staffing levels that we have in terms of that. So given that the passenger activity is increasing, we're trending toward record, as well as the construction activity as well. That's leading to us needing to increase some staffing levels. So there's some additional positions in there for 2024. That bottom chart is our capital improvement program. As I mentioned earlier, we are investing heavily into the airport right now through this capital program. And so we have budgeted 133.3 million for 2024. The bullets that you see right below that are some of the funding sources that we have identified for those. About 57 million of that comes from federal grants and some of the other funding sources we have that are restricted just for very specific uses on there. We anticipate issuing debt probably in the fall of 2024, again, through the county with that of about 28 million. That's not going to be the debt issuance. That's just the amount for 2024 that we're looking at. The debt issuance is going to be between 70 and 75 million for a principal amount on there. Then,
Just to talk about that just briefly, there's a few variables out there still that we're looking to try to close out in terms of how we size that issuance. The first variable is going to be the bipartisan infrastructure law airport terminals program, which we've done really well in the first two rounds, $26 million combined in the first two rounds. We are in now the third round. We've made that application in the third round, and there are two more rounds remaining. So this round, we applied for additional funding for the Terminal C TREX project. And then we're hoping to use the next two rounds to apply for the Central Hall. If we are successful, we would probably see a potentially larger issuance around Central Hall if we decide to add that in and pursue Central Hall. And so those are kind of the dynamics around that right now. And we're also processing a passenger facility charge application as well that will provide design funds for the Central Hall project. So things are moving really well. We feel very good about the timing and very good about our chances inside of the bipartisan infrastructure law. And remember, we also have programmed funding from the bipartisan infrastructure law. There's another section that's basically set aside money, and we have up to a little over 32 million coming over the course of the program for that. And so we've been very fortunate to use a lot of grant funds and cash available for funding TREX up to this point, as well as PFC funds. But we will very likely have to do that issuance sometime in, maybe that September timeframe, I think, of 24.
Very good. Thank you, Larry, for your comments. And any other, thank you for advancing to the next slide. So this just gives a little more detail into our capital program and by funding sources. So just some of the items that we have going on out at the airport right now. So obviously Concourse C TREX is really that big one that we have out there. And so there's a couple different funding sources for that. We also, related to that, we have a taxi lane and ramp project too that we're doing on that west side. Folks that have been out there recently, a lot of earth being moved out there on there, laying some concrete as well in the last couple of weeks in terms of those, for that project there. We are doing an improvement to our rental car facility, the Ground Transportation Center. It's phase 3 of that one. And then we have federal grants that Larry talked about. So that goes not just to the West Terminal Ramp project, but also Concourse Trex. And we are hopeful that we will continue to potentially get year 3 of that program, competitive grant program that will help, again, further potentially delay that bond issuance, but also help fund Concourse Trex as well. So a lot of moving parts to this.
So the competitive grant part of it, is it based on airport size?
It is. Excellent question and excellent recall. So when
I'm just guessing.
we had the
And
opportunity.
we do really well, so that's great.
We do well. And when we had an opportunity to help give input to the bipartisan infrastructure law, we advocated very strongly for allocations within hub size so that we didn't have to go and compete in one giant discretionary pot of funding. And that has worked out very well. So that is to our advantage that now there are 72 small hub airports that we're competing with. And I would say that because we were very prepared timing wise and ready to go with projects that were shovel ready, truly shovel ready, we did well in those first 2 rounds. Now, a lot of other airports have entered into that process. And so the competition is definitely increasing for that money, but it is very positive that we don't have to compete with airports of all sizes across the country.
And do they like consider that you did receive the past grants and that you've shown progress?
Yes, we have a very good reputation of putting that money to work right away and creating that economic benefit of the job creation, the spending on materials.
You can show like how many jobs were.
All of that.
Okay.
And when we had the National Airports Conference here in Spokane at the beginning of September, so we brought over 460 people in from all across the United States. Commissioner CUNY was there. I know you were there, Commissioner Waldorf, and that at the same time, we were also able to bring in the Associate Administrator of Airports for the FAA, who is a big decision maker in that process, and to show her the progress that we've made on Trex. And so I think we put our best foot forward and had a really good opportunity to continue to plant that seed that, hey, when we're given those resources, we will put those resources to work and create those really good paying jobs and kick off that spending throughout the economy on materials, supplies, systems, all of that, which is really good for the economy.
Just 2 more slides to, sorry, yeah, please, go ahead.
Commissioner French.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. The Spokane International Airport is the 2nd largest commercial airport in the state. Just to give you an idea of scale, last week, the CTAC presented to the port their 5-year capital budget program, which is a $5 billion with the B capital over 5 years, $1 billion a year that they've been spending. And it still just beats CTAC. So, Larry and his crew has done an incredible job in terms of not only maximizing out the value of the dollars we're getting, but being very competitive for the dollars that are out there. So I just wanted to share that with the board.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner French. So we have 2 more slides to go. So this next one just really is a summary of our rates. It's a couple of really key components to it. It's a terminal rental rate. So what does it cost to rent space at the airport? And when we say Class 1, that really just means your passenger-facing areas. So your ticket counters, your hold rooms, your gate areas, kind of thing. So this is increasing 4.9% over current year. So about a little over $66 per square foot per year for that. Then landing fee is increasing also 4.9% up to $2.35 per 1,000 pounds of landed weight. So very reasonable in terms of where we are. The next item below is just is an airport metric that we use. It's cost per enplanement. And what that basically says is what are the airlines paying to operate at Spokane International? $6.32 is in the lowest quartile of all U.S. airports, regardless of airport size. So we're extremely competitive with that, as well as extremely competitive within small size airports as well. So we continue through management of our cost structure to keep that cost per employment low, reasonable, try to give the airlines a reason to come to Spokane for that. And then the final slide is really just the summary of everything in terms of the proposed amount for 2024. The lower left-hand side is our operating expenses for the airport, the business park, and Felts Field. On the right-hand side is our capital program. So combined or consolidated for operating capital, we are proposing a budget of $184,882,945. And again, that's both operating and capital components combined for the airport. And I will happily take any questions, or Larry, if you have, did you have another comment?
Just to point out, Rob, that we're very, again, taking a very conservative approach, but at the same time, just appreciate the support we get from the commissioners and the county staff, Scott and his team. Spokane International Airport has a $3 billion economic impact in the community each year. We obviously want to continue to build that. And Felts Field also has $152 million impact to the local community. So we're going to continue to advance all of our projects with that goal in mind, is to continue to create jobs, continue to deliver value, and continue to operate our facilities in a very fiscally conservative but very customer-centric oriented way.
Well, first of all, amazing job on going out to get all these funds, and with the construction, it's really exciting to see. Was just curious on the operating expenses, just to learn a bit more about staffing, outlook on wages, those types of things for the next year.
So we have a number of positions. Our budget, our cost structure has looked better because we've never really been able to fill all the positions. I know that is a challenge everywhere, but we are looking, and we've seen some more positive indicators lately in terms of response to job opportunities. Some of the jobs, as you know, are very specialized jobs where we're recruiting within a very small universe of qualified candidates, and other jobs have a little bit more opportunities. So we're hoping this year that we can do a better job of filling the majority of the open positions. We really need to, in order to continue to, to operate at the level that we want to. Wages have really been at market, I would say, and we are negotiating. We just finished negotiating a maintenance union agreement, and we're keeping the agreements relatively short term because of the concern about outlook. And I can talk to you more about that. But as we entered into the pandemic-induced recession, we had some, remorse about the longer-term agreements and what they were costing us when we were looking at a time where we had to do some pretty dramatic and quick cost reduction in order to live within our means. And so we've been taking a very cautious approach with short-term agreements around those. But we are committed to, paying those market wages and benefits to our employees, and we've budgeted accordingly.
And there's a lot of employees that aren't your employees that are out there. I mean,
Excellent point, Madam Chair. Yes,
Yes,
yes, and there are a number of employees out there that are not our employees per se, with rental cars, airlines, ground handlers, TSA, et cetera, as well.
To that point, how is TSA doing in there? Do you keep communication with them about their
Daily.
Yeah, I know that can be. I know that was a
say
challenge in causing some all over the country trying to fill those positions.
those challenges remain, unfortunately, and they are doing their level best within all of their, confines of the parameters they have. Bless you, Scott. The federal workers did receive a wage increase, a pretty sizable one, and the TSOs, the Transportation Security Officers, were the beneficiaries of that. But there is still a lot of challenge in, to attract workers in that pay band, that hourly pay band, and so they continue to struggle with staffing. we had a number of what they call national deployment officers that are basically temporary employees that they flexed into our community to help with the summer travel season. Those employees have rolled out, and so we have seen an increase in wait times around the lack of staffing. To make matters a little bit more complicated, we've also been in the process of a multi-million-dollar baggage system renovation project. And so we have luggage screening devices now, CTX devices, and that just makes things a little bit slower. And those devices have had some operational problems because they're older devices. So that has also been a bit of a challenge right now. So the staffing and the equipment piece have really been challenging.
I remember last year you were heavily advertising for the snow removal
Yes.
folks. Did you end up finding enough people? Because I know that was
We've
tough
done
for-
really well this year.
Okay.
And I think it's a sign, as I mentioned earlier.
I felt like I saw advertisements everywhere.
Yes, and if you still know
Spokane Airport
people,
is hiring.
yes, and we're actually doing really well this year, much better than we did previously. And I think that's part of the indicators that I mentioned earlier, that we are seeing more response to job opportunities. So it's very encouraging that way. And in fact, I took a call from an interested person last week who was retired from Clearwater and looking for something to do, had great skills, had a CDL. And I'm like, let me get your name and number. We'll be right back to you, because those are the types of people we really want for those winter overhire positions. But we're doing much better this year. Thank you for asking about that.
Well, the advertising sure got my attention.
Well, that's good. Then we know we're being effective. Well, we
I need to get my
each year
CDL.
we have a very detailed forecast, and we go. The National Weather Service comes to the airport board and gives a briefing. We had that in October, and we're in a La Nina cycle, which would suggest that we're going to see, I think, based on what they told us, between 20 and 30 inches of snow this season, as opposed to more around the average or higher. We had 61 inches last year. So that will obviously help the budget. Looking at Rob, if we don't have as many big snow events or ice events to contend with this season. Thank you.
Thank you for your time this morning.
Okay, thank you very much. So this will be on our agenda for next week
Fantastic.
to
Appreciate
process
that.
that.
Yes,
Great. Thank you.
thank you very much.
Good. I think you're staying.
Yes, if you'd like us to, and to roll into.
Yes. So, Mr. Anderson.
Yes, I believe we have a pending potential litigation executive session pursuant to RCW 4230-110-1I. Those present should be the board, Scott Simmons, myself, and then Larry Crowder, Todd Woodard, Rob Schultz, Brian Wurst, John Sheehan, and Jeff Longsworth. Missing anybody?
Lisa Corcoran.
Lisa Cortland as well.
And how long do we anticipate?
I believe we have this one down for 20 minutes, 25 minutes, or 30 minutes.
I just want to make sure that's,
Yes, ma'am.
okay. So we are going to go into executive session now for the purpose just stated with the people that'll be attending for 30 minutes. It will take us a few minutes to clear the room and get everybody in. It is now 9:35. And no action.
No action.
No action is anticipated. We plan to come out, we'll say 10:05, and if we need to extend, we can. Thank you all. So we'll clear the room for anyone that was not on that list.
Yeah, no, and I know. I broke my butt this morning.
Okay, thank you, welcome back. We did extend our executive session for 4 minutes. There was the initial 10-minute extension, and we did extend for another 4 minutes, so we came out at 10:19. It does take us just a few minutes to get switched back around, so it is now 10:22, and we will restart our agenda. So that takes us to Randy Bishop, item number C.
Just to let you know, there's going to be a few items, resolutions on your consent agenda next week. The first one that was in your packet is in regard to the budget meeting that is set for December 4th. That will be a public meeting, so you will be putting that on your consent agenda for next week. The second consent agenda item will be in regard to revenue relating to property taxes. That public meeting will be set for November 28th. And so you will have that on your consent agenda as well. And then the third item that's going to be on your consent agenda that I just passed out to you, Chris, yours is on your computer. And Al, I emailed you a copy this morning. This is in regard to our budget conversation where we talked about moving the interest income from the special revenue funds, except for the road fund and any other funds where it is required by law that we can't, and also from our internal service funds, that we were going to move that money to the general fund and use that for one-time capital for this year. And so that is the resolution that will effect that. Has been prepared by Mr. Amacio, gone through legal, and that will also be on your consent agenda for next week. So those are the three that I had. Just wanted to let you know what you were going to have on your consent agenda. Any questions?
Any questions for Randy? Go ahead.
Okay, so on the second, so this, sorry, okay, so we have just the general hearing on the budget,
Right,
And then
that'll be a public hearing on the
Right.
4th.
right?
Yep.
And then,
We have the public hearing
Oh,
for
considering-
property taxes, revenue.
and or,
It's property taxes.
Only.
So it would be the property road tax, conservation futures tax, and the general fund property tax. That is a public hearing. It is
Okay.
required to be a public hearing. We will be presenting 4 options for you.
Okay.
I've talked to each of you.
okay,
I haven't talked to Al yet, but there's 4 options that will be presented. You will make your decision on that day at that meeting. That will then drive what we put on the certification levy. That will be no later than the 12th. It could either be the 4th or the 12th.
got it,
And then this new one for the interest.
got it.
Bring it.
Thank you.
You
Get us
bet.
back on track.
Try.
Yes. Wow. Okay, then that's gonna take us to Doug. Is like favorites too.
Yeah, whatever's easiest. Okay.
We can pull up other chairs back there too.
Well, I was thinking Evan might run the PowerPoint at the head, if that's okay.
I can do it.
Okay, so Ron will manage that for you. Okay. And we'll have you, let's have you sit right here, Evan. And Susan, why don't you grab a seat there? I'll introduce you here.
Commissioner French?
Yeah, as Doug is getting set up, I just wanted to do a shout out to Doug and his team. He was able to work with the city of Spokane and the city council to be able to get an agreement to provide water to the West Terrace Neighborhood Park. And I just want to congratulate Doug and his team on a job well done. And And thanks for carrying the water for the county.
Thank you. We're very excited. That
Awesome.
went very well yesterday.
Okay, very good. Okay, Doug, I will let you take over.
Sure. Thank you very much, Board. I'll introduce my guests here today. We have Susan Nielsen with the City of Spokane Valley in the Economic Development Division, if I'm saying that correctly. You know Casey, and then of course, Evan Eliff, thank you, with the Sport Facilities Companies and Sport Facilities Advisory, which you'll see a lot on the slides, is one of those companies. And we're very, very pleased to have had the opportunity to work collaboratively with the City of Spokane Valley and have Evan and his team's help in preparing a master plan and economic impact evaluation as a component of that for our Plants Ferry Sports Complex. You may recall, we were very fortunate in receiving some ARPA funds that we're excited to put to work with the first phase. And this plan is intended to serve as a roadmap or a guide to assist us with what that first phase and future phases may look like. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Evan, and you'll see he and his team have just done a ton of work through this process.
Thanks for that, Doug. And to that point, there is a lot of information to cover. It's a robust study. We delivered that information. So as I go through this, I will be pretty brief on most of these topics in respect of the time that we have here today. I will slow down quite a bit for the most important pieces of information, the design, the cost, the projection of performance. But ultimately, over the next 20 minutes or so, I'll give you a quick introduction to the project, share some of the key findings that drove a lot of the information that we've provided, the recommendations that we've made, dive in a bit deep on the conceptual design. It is conceptual at this point, obviously within a feasibility study and the opinion of cost. Share the financial forecast, economic impact projections, and then wrap up with conclusion and next steps before we open it up for questions, answers, open discussion, anything that would be helpful for you. So thank you very much for your time. Once again, Evan Eliff, I'm a partner with Sports Facilities Companies, been with the companies for 12 years now, leading a lot of our pre-development advisory and existing facility optimization services, and very, very familiar with this community, the greater Spokane area. We've done a lot of work here. We did the study that led to the podium, downtown stadium, some of the other projects that you've seen recently as well, from an economic development, economic impact standpoint, we've been involved with also. So if you wouldn't mind progressing the next slide, and one more, please. So project introduction, let me just talk about the structure very quickly. So first, I think you're all aware of this, but this is truly in the study and in the next steps, the concept for this project, a joint effort between Spokane County Parks, Recreation, and Golf and the City of Spokane Valley. We've had a lot of representation, a lot of great work by representatives both from the county and from the city to help steer, guide, and ensure that we're on the right direction. This is one of several that the city is investigating. I think that you may have seen some information, but several different tourism options and opportunities. This one happens to be a pretty exciting one in our opinion because it is an existing complex, an existing park with a sports complex aspect, and lots of opportunities for improvement, not just on an economic development and economic tourism basis, but also for the benefit of the locals. And ultimately, one of the driving pieces of this structure is ARPA funds, as Doug just mentioned, have been made available. So there is an allocation that as we understand, the county has identified would be an appropriate use of those dollars for phase one approach. In order to use those dollars, that portion of this project must be under construction in the next calendar year. And so time is of the essence, particularly for phase one. And so our focus is really on getting the ball moving into that next phase of evaluation and implementation that Doug and his team will lead. Next slide, please. Very quick overview of our scope of work. We started with a kickoff call. We have updated our market analysis, spent a lot of time with existing data review, came into market for site visit. It was fairly cold, as I recall. And so we're back here in slightly better weather today, but really looking at the existing sports complex assets at Plants Ferry, and then getting into conceptual design, recommendations, opinion of cost, et cetera, for the whole plan. Next slide, please. Thank you. So on the left is the existing Plants Ferry Sports Complex. Now, What's not fully represented there are the sort of passive, more community aspects of the park. They're grayed out a little bit to the west side of the design on the right. One thing I want to be very clear, this is a focus on the sports aspects. This does not, we were very cautious to make sure that there is no impact or lack of access to the more passive recreation, picnic shelters, access to trails, et cetera, on the rest of the park. So really focusing in on the current sports fields and making as much possible use of the existing infrastructure was a key component of this challenge. So as we go through this process, I will detail phase 1, phase 2, the overall impacts, but at a general level, if you take a look at the right-hand side, the overall finished conceptual design, really the primary areas of focus were, let's improve the diamonds. I'm going north to south, this is not prioritized, but north to south. Let's improve the diamonds, add synthetic turf, fix the grading, add lights to a few of those fields to extend play. Let's grade those fields with full outfields so they're not falling off a ledge out at the back, and add parking and some support buildings. When you look at the lighter green fields, those 6 fields that are sort of in the middle off to the left, those are synthetic turf, fully lighted. Phase 1 will include 3 of those fields with fencing and lighting around it. Phase 2 will eventually expand for the other 3 fields that are synthetic turf. And then on the right, 7 existing fields that are then improved, not lighted because of proximity to the neighbors. But on top of this, 2 of the challenges that Plants Ferry, the sports complex, currently faces. Number 1, it is certainly underparked. And so we've addressed that with this component, especially for tournaments and events where you'll be drawing a lot of people at the same time. The second aspect, and one of the things that was very clear to us through a robust public engagement process, is the traffic, the ingress, egress to the site creates a lot of challenges, especially currently up to the north, coming around the backside, past all of the houses, parking on the side of the street, underparked, so it overflows and overspills. And that's a challenge for a lot of the residents, and we want to be very conscious of that. So as part of this, we have made a recommendation for a new primary entrance down to the south side off of Trent Avenue. Next slide, please. Yes, ma'am.
So I mean, thinking of that and knowing that neighborhood, how many parking spots do we have now versus how many are you anticipating?
There
were 600 now, and it's gonna be
Yeah, I think like
1,500 when we're done.
660 now, and there'll be over 1,000 additional, is what I recall in the plan.
Yeah, so it's about 1,100 new parking spaces. Now, some of the older lots do get displaced, so we're in the 1,500 range in total, but that meets the recommendation. So generally speaking, for a tournament complex, about 90 parking spaces per field. We're looking at an 18-field complex, so we're right in that range, 1,500 to 1,600. Currently with about 600, well under parked. Certainly a challenge for existing events that go there.
And then to the west, or yes, I know you said you weren't talking about, but there's still access to the river from that area.
Absolutely. Okay. Next slide, please. And by the way, any other questions as I go through, feel free to fire away. So just very quickly, sports facilities companies, this is what we do. We focus on community level sports, recreation, wellness, event, and entertainment complexes. We've been doing this work since we were founded in 2003. Over that period of time, we've grown into the, I believe, the largest and most active company in this space for youth and amateur community-based sports, recreation, wellness. So we've served over, actually 3,500, it says 2,500 up there, but we need to update that slide. Over 3,500 communities. We see many millions of visitors. We generate over $750 million of economic impact in the communities that we serve through the tournaments and events. And a lot of our facilities across the country are focused purely on local residents, seasonal water parks, and local recreation centers. Next slide, please. In terms of some of the facilities we manage, there are 37 on this slide. We actually manage 50 facilities across the country, but a combination of indoor facilities, outdoor facilities, and indoor-outdoor facilities. All of that information just allows us to have real-time, real-world experience and recommendations for development, for operations, and ultimately how to make the best use of assets to serve your community and maximize the impact. Next slide, please. Final piece that I will touch base on just in terms of company overview, because we do this and we've got 3 arms of our company, an advisory firm, which is SFA, that's what was truly on the contract engaged for this project. That's really facility planning and optimization planning. We have a development arm that works through project implementation, design, and construction, and we have the operations arm serving millions and millions of people around the country on an annual basis through the 50 facilities that we manage. And all of those services, again, we are focused here on the first two bullets on that sort of Candyland map, really feasibility. But our perspective is, in a proper feasibility study, we can't just focus on what works on paper. We have to be thinking about the long-term approach and creating that roadmap. We often call it packing for the whole trip. And so that's been part of the lens that we've looked through here. Next slide, please. From a key findings perspective, I'll touch base on the first piece in a little bit of depth and then go very quickly, if you wouldn't mind progressing one more. So we have a process, I think it oversimplifying to put it into this funnel process. We want to start with the most important question, why? And so as we facilitate that conversation, we define success. What are the desired or required outcomes of this initiative in order to make it a successful project? And in facilitating that conversation with the city, with the county, and several key stakeholders, 3 rows to the top. These are not prioritized in any specific order, but number 1, grow sports tourism. Plants Ferry has the number of fields and the capacity technically to be a great sports tourism asset. It is not currently used that way. It's not currently maintained that way. It is underparked, as I mentioned. So that is a key initiative. Because of economic impact, drawing new visitation from out of market, new heads in beds, hotel stays, spending at restaurants, retail, entertainment, and your transportation and whatnot. Projects like this, when successfully and properly implemented, do spur economic development. We met with a lot of different groups, including the hoteliers. The hoteliers in the city and across the county have recognized sports tourism as a primary driver for stays in their hotels. They are generally across the board, I don't think I'm overstating this, very supportive of any initiative related to sports and sports tourism, because they know that it will not only support their existing businesses, but also can provide fuel for additional businesses that can also prosper and thrive in this market. And of course, sports tourism, economic impact, that's great, but we can't do it at the expense of our locals. This is a park. It was built as a park. It was operated as a park. It's still used regularly for local programming. We have to improve access to local programs and the experience of your local residents, and we use this on a regular basis. So next slide, and this is where I will go very quickly. Market factors. We use a lot of data and research to understand the dynamics and the fabric of the community. We look across the local, sub-regional, and regional basis at several key factors and data points. This is a very high-level summary of some of those. How many people are there? How much expendable income is there? What does future growth look like? How much do people currently spend on recreation programming? And what does it really mean in terms of their disposable income and the cost of living here relative to the cost or the median household income? And so this helps us to identify, in this case, from a local level, we need to be very conscious of pricing here. It would be easy to put a pro forma in place and a projection of financials that blows up revenue, costing your locals a lot of money to use the park. We've maintained consistent structure, fair market value, because we do expect some price sensitivity. And if we're going to improve access to local programs, it can't just be about building better facilities. It has to be about maintaining access operationally and programmatically. Next slide, please. This just expands that across the sub-regional 60 to 90 minutes and the regional marketplace up to 4-hour drive time. Next slide, please. We don't just look in charts, we also look in maps. And so we want to understand where people live, where the density of the population is, where the existing facilities are, where the highest and lowest levels of household income exist, so that we can understand relative to this park, relative to the people who will use it most regularly on a weekday basis, as an example, what services can be offered, can be expanded, and how can we keep it accessible from a cost, time, and location standpoint for everyone who wants to use this facility. Next slide, please. And finally, I'll share on the market factors. The 4-hour drive time is about 2.5 million people. Now, in reality, as we go south and east, we'll drive from more than 4 hours. It will be difficult to get more than 4 hours away going straight west, because that's where we start to hit Seattle. Seattle has so many facilities, it is difficult to get people to drive across the state. But generally speaking, we viewed the 4-hour drive time as the most reliable set of population base to pull from for tournaments and events. That's about 2.5 million people. Next slide, please. So as we get into the next layer of research analysis in market/data industry, we look at participation rates. And I won't go through the details of this, but from a participation standpoint, what this pointed out to us was not only in terms of what people should be playing and who is currently involved in local program provider services, but also what assets do you have and what are you serving. It was very clear to us that any improvements to this complex needed to be focused on flexibility. We can't just be focused on soccer, just be focused on baseball. It has to have softball implications. It has to be convertible for flag football and lacrosse and ultimate frisbee, several other activities that, if properly designed, maintained for flexibility, we can serve a wide range of uses, not just a few of the biggest and most vocal, potentially you could call them the most powerful user groups. We want to expand and make this accessible for a lot of people at a lot of different levels of participation. Next slide, please. Again, sub-regional and regional rates, I won't go through, but points to the same conclusion. Next slide, please. One more, sorry, thank you. From a competition perspective, we call it competition, but really it's local service providers as well. Some of these are complementary, right? You don't have to compete with every facility in the county. In a lot of cases, we want to look at what's going on in the county and how that available inventory may actually support the expansion of this initiative by bringing in even bigger tournaments that will be at multiple locations. So on the left-hand side, those bulleted lists are really what we look for the local facilities. Where's their location? What assets do they have? How are they supported through parking and food and beverage and restrooms? What programs are being offered? How is it being priced? How is it being rented? And who are the partners in those facilities? The right-hand side of that list is much more about the tournament components that we research and analyze through the competitive set. How many tournaments are being offered? When are they happening? How large are they? Who travels? What level are they traveling to? What are their policies in terms of parking, gate, food and beverage? How can we reliably, incredibly build a model that takes advantage of the opportunity to generate revenue without looking too aggressively or optimistically? Next slide, please. Sorry, one more slide. Don't know why that one's in there. So ignore that slide. It's the same content as later. Sorry, one back, please. This is important. We went through, as I mentioned, a robust process of engaging the community. We did that in in-person meetings during our first trip. We had follow-up meetings. We had an entire public input session after the draft was in place with great input and feedback from people who live right next door and people who live with it, across the county. Some of the things that rose to the top, although all of these are important and it didn't necessarily prioritize, but the red circles there, traffic, clearly a big issue for your most local folks, and the quality of the fields, an issue for all of the local users. Additionally, we saw a lot of input that, hey, we need some level of lights, we need more parking, we need better access to restrooms, we need more economic impact, more tournaments to participate in. So all of these were factored in, and frankly, credit to your community, a lot of the input and insights that they provided aligned with what the data showed and what the best practices are. So very well in tune with what should happen here. And if you continue to progress, now we will get into the actual conceptual design. So breaking this down, next slide, please. Sort of a two-phased approach, but we do have a phase 2 and phase 2A and 2B, excuse me. Focusing first on phase 1, if you'll progress. So I mentioned first from a fields perspective, this phase 1 will focus on the development of 3 fields that are fully synthetic. So converting existing space, making great use of the existing service building, and putting these 3 fields right next to it that are lighted, that are lined for youth programming as well as full-size fields. This shows as soccer, but again, I want to bring up the point, these are multi-purpose fields. Additionally, having some parking down to the south of these fields to make better access for these fields specifically. And of course, looking at perimeter fencing to protect the synthetic turf, stormwater drainage, and several other factors. Additionally, in phase 1, if you go to the next slide, this is where we've located conceptually and based on a preliminary look at the site, a new primary entrance off of Trent Avenue. So this will alleviate a lot of the concerns. There are plenty of different ways to actually structure ingress and egress depending on the activity, but this will allow people to not be parked on the side of the road because of the increased parking and the better access here, and come off of Trent. Now, I do want to be clear, when we look at the cost estimates, this is an important factor to remember. Our study is looking at the on-site costs and engineering that needs to happen. If a new primary entrance off of Trent would also include signaling, ingress, egress, or accel, decel lanes coming in and out, those would be off-site costs, so they aren't included in this. I just want to be clear that that is a portion of the implementation that will need to be talked about in addition to everything else that's going on around this complex. As we get into phase two then, excuse me, I'm sorry. So opinion of cost. So we provided a range. First and foremost, on the left-hand side, what we call SFC and our partner Kinley Horn, this is our opinion of cost. We are developing, as an example, 135 synthetic turf fields across the country right now. We know how much we are paying for turf. We know how much we are paying for site development. We then localize this for the site. So we have an opinion of cost that had a lot of different iterations through this process. Some higher than the $5 million ARPA fund allocation, some lower, and ultimately with feedback and with the approach that we've recommended here, looking at something that does extend beyond the current ARPA dollars, but makes the best use of the funds available and the improvement process here. And so that phase one that we just looked at, our opinion cost is right around $6 million. Now, we also got feedback and some local costs from other projects, many of them smaller, many of them with different components, and so it's not exactly apples to apples, but we wanted to be responsive to and reflective of the possibility that in addition to the contingency already baked into the SFC opinion of cost, there could be some additional contingencies that need to be evaluated. And so as this project moves from feasibility into implementation, one of the key factors will be local cost estimating, and we wanted to provide a range that covers sort of the very, very high side. We expect we'd be very comfortable in the SFC number, but we didn't want to be reflective of just our information and not take into account feedback that we also received from engineers and whatnot. So that provides a range at 10% and 55%. The reason it's all the way up 55% higher than the SFC cost, to point out a specific example, is the cost of turf. In some of the recent turf costs that you have seen from smaller projects, single fields, and different type of turf, the turf costs have been double what we are seeing on a national average for turf. And so that is project specific, that has a lot of other factors. There's a procurement and a purchasing process that can all be evaluated. So it does create a contingency level that as a percent is much higher on the right-hand side of that chart as a percent of the SFC numbers. That's much smaller in phase two because there's a lot less turf implication there. As we get into phase two then, phase 2A and B, we will continue to expand, but even this first phase one with the conversion of synthetic turf on 3 fields and the addition of lights creates an increased capacity of 19% across all of the rectangular fields. We're not touching in phase one the diamonds, so there's no impact there. When you look at all of the available hours in terms of how we would recommend using this facility to keep it high quality, to provide access, and to not spend an enormous amount of money replacing grass because you're playing on it right after it rained all the time and then having to resod, that's a 13% overall capacity increase to this complex just with phase one. Next slide, please. As we get into phase two then, phase 2A really focuses on the 7 existing grass fields. We're not adding lighting, but those fields are undersized. They are, in some cases, very narrow. They have a lot at this point, given when they were last fixed up. There's a lot of grade, a lot of slope. Now that helps with water, it does not help with playing. And so improving there, adding a support building for local access, restrooms, food and beverage sales, additional parking. The total parking that we've allocated in phase one plus phase two in total is 1,600 spots, to go back to a comment from earlier. That's 1,400 of those coming in phase two, 1,600 in total. Next slide, please. So here's another large component of the parking. Really the primary parking lot as you enter the site and come in for parking is down there sort of on that south side. Great access to that new entry road. And then additionally, the circulation throughout the site has been a key point of emphasis for how it actually works, how people can drive in and around. Next slide, please. Phase 2B then touches base on the diamond fields. So with those diamond fields, we've recommended synthetic turf infields on all of them. That will reduce your maintenance costs. That will increase the number of time the amount of time, that you get on a daily basis and throughout the year. And then 3 of those fields, 16, 17, and 18, would have LED low light pollution lights so that we can bring back adult softball, as an example, which used to be a huge component here and has fallen off because of the quality of the field. And so that's a key component. We heard a lot from some of your adult softball players or potential players. Next slide, please. The other component of phase 2B is then the other 3 fields. Now, in phase 1, when we built the first 3 fields, we recommended putting a fence around those fields to protect the synthetic turf. As part of phase 2B, we would recommend putting a perimeter fence around the entire site, just to control access. This is a safety component. It's a protection of your investment component. It is not meant to decrease accessibility, but it adds a layer of protection before the investment. Next slide, please. So again, structure here, you'll recall that on phase 1, the right-hand side went up plus 55%. Again, smaller variation here is plus 23% on the contingency level 2, but our costs based on what we're seeing from all of those facilities we're developing are right around $35 million for phase 2. That could be up to about $42.5 million for phase 2 in the highest contingency level. I do want to also point out this note at the bottom, our opinion of cost for phase 2, because the timing is unclear of when additional dollars will be made available. These are shown in current dollars, so what you would look to take on this year and next year. It is possible that this could be 3, 5, 7 years down the road by the time you get a full implementation of phase 2. So to prevent that unknown from coming to play in these costs, these are 2023 current dollars, and then they would scale up with escalation and continued inflation depending on the timing of when you decide to move forward with phase 2. Next slide, please. From a capacity perspective, now we're touching both sides of the house, if you will. Total of 52% increased capacity over the multi-purpose fields, total of 65% increased capacity of the diamond fields because they are larger. So, three of those 5 fields lighted, synthetic turf infields. Across the entire complex, this investment would add about 57% more time available to use this complex. Next slide, please. Also wanted to provide, because synthetic turf is always a question mark for communities we serve, we provided a cost of ownership analysis. Synthetic turf is warranted for, depending on the product, 8 to 10 years. That is effectively the useful life. When we look at the cost of development and the cost of maintenance and the additional time that you can use synthetic turf fields and the additional rates that you can charge for synthetic turf fields, typically the return on investment is right around that 5 to 7 year mark. This shows it right after year 6 in this analysis, but that provides the timeline to return on the investment. And then you've got a few years where you are growing on that investment before you start looking at replacing the upper level of synthetic turf. But in that same time period, you're going to be regrading, resodding fields as well. So you kind of hit the reset button in the 8 to 10 year range, get the return on investment in the year 6 range. Next slide, please. So with all of this, of course, we had to put in place a financial forecast economic impact analysis. I'll briefly touch on this. This is a different structure than current. You've got a volunteer organization running the complex currently. They are doing some internal charging and using that to cover the cost of maintenance. In this structure, we would recommend that once phase 1 and phase 2, which is what this reflects about, not in between, but once phase 2 is in place and you've got the fully updated complex, this is the potential for financial forecast. Again, 2023 dollars, revenue will go up, expenses, of course, will inflate over time. But this shows the potential for this complex, even paying attention to the local costs and the accessibility factors that I mentioned, not raising rates dramatically, or really the goal is not at all, for your existing user bases on that local level. 1 million up to about $1.25 million of total revenue opportunity. Of course, anytime we're generating revenue, we have variable costs. Next slide, please. Those are the costs of goods sold. And so this shows how much you pay to generate that business. And what results from this is a gross margin, which is what's left over to cover as much of your overhead operating expenses as possible. Next slide, please. The gross margin on that revenue minus the cost of goods sold is about $750,000 up to about $900,000 by year 5, to sort of full maturity when you've fully built out the number of tournaments that you have the option to bring in and continue to expand local programming. As is the case with almost all outdoor complexes, and as is the case currently with Plants Ferry, this will require subsidy. The gross profit is not enough to cover all of the overhead costs, but that is sort of the cost of doing business of a complex like this. And so if you go to the next slide, this summarizes that gross margin minus the overhead costs and the subsidy as you get started in the $500,000 range per year, going down slightly as you grow, but of course we have increased expenses. So this is a conservative approach, a conservative estimate. I do want to be clear, when we look at those total operating expenses, the 1.25 up to $1.35 million to operate, that includes dedicated management and maintenance, outside professional services, insurance costs. It is fully baked. There is, under the joint venture structure that may come into play, that would come into play based on what we're working on now, there are any number of ways that some of those overhead costs could be mitigated or taken off of the operation, but we have fully loaded the complex with all of its expenses to get this level of financial forecast. Next slide, please. Now, the trade-off for, in addition to improving access, improving quality, improving access for your local residents and for tournaments, is economic impact. So we've provided a projection of different types of events, 22 up to 27 events per year that can be fit into the current structure while still serving weekend uses during non-tournament times for your local programs. And we've also analyzed the cost of visiting this market. Someone coming from more than 90 minutes away who spends the night in a hotel and eats at restaurants and whatnot, they're going to spend about $150 per person per day. It's slightly less than that in the fine numbers that you see out there. But when we look at those number of tournaments and that spending from non-locals, if you go to the next slide, we've also projected the number of non-local days in market. Again, those are overnight visitors only, and the number of room nights. So this complex, when built out for phase 1 and phase 2, generates 27 to 30,000 room nights, which is based on the information we have from the past, just to put it in perspective, about three times more than Plants Ferry has done in the past in larger tournament years. And same can be said for the economic impact. Looking at direct spending, only that $148 and some change per person times the number of non-local overnight visitors per year gets to about $15 million of economic impact. That's money spent in hotels, restaurants, retail, entertainment establishments, transportation, and then there's a miscellaneous other category. So those are tax revenue dollars as well. They translate into net new tax revenue generation for city properties and for the county, and of course for the state as well on sales tax. Next slide, please. So in landing the plane here with conclusions and next steps, next slide. We want to start with, is this feasible based on the original goals, the why of the project, and what this complex can do, this plan can do, and I think fairly elegantly taking into account desire from your local residents, your neighbors, truly, the people who live right next to the complex, and everyone else that we've talked to, is that this does have the opportunity to grow sports tourism, to be a driver of economic development, and to improve local programs. In terms of then implementing, next slide, please, the most immediate next steps will come from this feasibility assessment, and we call this a feasibility yes if. And so that means that some work has to be done in order to truly call this a feasible project that is adopted by the city and the county and motivates action. But first and foremost, a funding plan has to be created to cover the cost of both phases of redevelopment if we are truly talking about a future phase 1 plus phase 2 development. In order to do that, an intergovernmental agreement will need to be created, between the city and the county. We have provided, it's on the next slide, but we have provided 2 examples of that from similar scenarios that I think will be great framework and insights for how other communities have done this with the city and county partnership, and ultimately a long-term plan in place with both parties or whatever the structure ends up being for long-term operating capital improvement and replacement costs. So in terms of immediate next steps, next slide, please. Final slide, really. Number 1, we're here today, presentation to you this morning, presentation to the city in a few hours. From there, our recommendation is, especially with that requirement of 2024 implementation for phase 1, get to work on the implementation for phase 1. That will require additional engineering, local cost estimates, a lot of work, frankly, for Doug and his team and several others, but that is what it will take to get it done. Creating that funding plan will be a key component, and then exploring the opportunities for that intergovernmental agreement. As I mentioned, there's the verbiage on having provided 2 examples. And ultimately, if everyone is on board with the impact, with the expenditure, and with the way that this serves your community, then we would consider this to be a project that can be a great addition and improvement on what's currently happening here in the county and for the city and all of the residents and constituents that you care about most. So with that, I will wrap up and turn it over to you for any questions, comments, discussion points.
Thank you. That was a lot to take
That was a
in.
lot.
But you
I'm
did a
breathing.
good job.
I'm
You're
breathing.
fast. So did you take into consideration, like if a tournament were to come, if there was a large tournament and it also had to use other facilities in the area, like the benefit that this would bring?
Yeah,
I know
so-
Dwight Merkle has they have the turf, synthetic turf fields too, right?
Yep.
So like if you bring this to the table, you have both of those facilities, does that make it more attractive?
It absolutely does, and there are a few reasons for that. I won't belabor this point, but a couple things. Number one, keep in mind that when we run tournaments, we will still be serving local teams. And so there is a component, in most cases, 30% or more of the teams participating in the tournament will be local. And so we're still serving local residents. When we have the opportunity to bring very large tournaments in, it is a benefit in most cases to look at multiple sites, because if you crowd everyone onto one site, then only the most local hotels are going to benefit. This is called compression in economic development, where now with multiple sites, you get larger crowds, you get more spread across different properties for people staying and for money being spent. And ultimately, that is absolutely an opportunity. With 13 long fields, you in this market could draw some 20-field tournaments. You can't do it all at Plants Ferry. What our projections, just to be clear, our projections are only focused on Plants Ferry, because we didn't want to take the expectation that we know this can happen and everybody's going to be on board and will do. So that is just for these 13 diamonds, 5 baseball fields, but there would be additional above and beyond for expanded or oversized overflow tournaments.
So this is gonna go to the city, the Valley Council tonight. And I guess, you know, because we have some of the ARP dollars that are going in, is that enough to do phase 1?
I don't think it will cover everything within the current phase 1. And as you looked at those different levels of projections, I think with the higher, more local input, they may have looked outside and more at that interchange. And I think they included some estimates there that were not in the low estimate, for example. And so working with the funds that we have, we would have to look at prioritizing and doing a portion of phase 1 based on the current estimates and funds available. So that would be something that we'd be looking at.
Okay, and I noticed as you quickly went through the slides that in the cost and revenue projections and stuff, there was parking revenue. I think that parking, if you knowing the Valley, like we know the Valley, if you charge for parking, then you're gonna have people parking in the community. And so I don't know how realistic that would be to do that, because it would put a lot of pressure then back into that community and those neighborhoods that are trying to alleviate that we're trying to help alleviate that. So anyway, that would just be.
I think it's worked fairly well. They've been doing that for major tournaments. We've had to have the operators put signage along the side of the road because of those issues, and I would say we've had mixed success to that point. But that is something that they've been doing, and those revenues now are collected by the association, and they are all used towards operational expenses on their end.
So do we know how much that's happening at this point in time?
As far as the parking, I believe all major tournaments.
Do you know how much revenue they're?
I don't know off the top exactly what they're generating, if it's 30 to 50,000 a year. I think it's notable, but I can certainly find out. I can get a figure from Bessie and be able to share that. Two very quick points on that. Number one, they do have a parking buyout. So we've had this conversation with Rush. They have a parking buyout option where instead of charging for parking, the event's rights holder can simply purchase the rights to parking, and whether or not they charge, that generates revenue for the complex. The other factor is this is a common component that we have to deal with. I just want you to be aware, we've got policies in place in other facilities with similar challenges where, yes, we still count it as parking revenue, but instead of charging on site during the day of parking, we have a structure that for every team that registers, there's just an upcharge to allow for parking. So it's a parking charge, but rather than then man it and have a change of dollars, it's already paid for. So the revenue comes in and we don't have to worry about that. And then we're mitigating that challenge. So operationally, there are ways to work around that, but I certainly appreciate that comment. It is absolutely something that we thought about and considered, and it doesn't show up in a spreadsheet as well as it does from an operator's perspective.
And then my other question is on the revenue, anticipated revenue from the economic impact. How much is that is city of Spokane Valley versus county? to look at that? Did you separate those out or just looked at it as a whole?
Yeah, so we just looked at it as a whole. And there are several, complicating factors with future development. Are there new hotels? Where are those new hotels at? So we have not broken it down city versus county. We can certainly do that in tax dollars as a supplement, as an update, if that would be helpful for you. But no, we did not separate out spend and stays in unincorporated versus within the city itself.
Because I think out there really aren't any county hotels. I think out there it's all City of Liberty Lake or City of Spokane Valley hotels. So we wouldn't be seeing that economic impact, which is 85% or 85 cents on the dollar versus the whole the amount. So I mean, so those are things as we're looking to be the primary investors, which at this point in time on phase one we're the primary investor. What that would be.
Yeah, in 2016, we studied that, and at that time, and it could have changed, they estimated that 70% of the benefit was in the city of Spokane Valley, I think 5 to 10% in Liberty Lake, and then the difference in unincorporated counties. And again, that may not be accurate today. A lot of time has gone by, but it provides a sense, a snapshot in time in the past.
Questions?
So has the City of the Valley discussed, like, since potentially 70% of the revenue, although that would be in the future, once you build out the whole complex, probably, would go back to the city. Maybe they might be interested in using their tourism tax dollars to help fund the improvements. I mean, just to match the 5 million of the county. I don't know if there's been any discussion about that.
We've not, with this, we've not.
I realize it's a county facility.
Yeah.
But the benefit
Sure.
to the City of the Valley is
Specific to this study and the ARPA funds, we did not ask for a match, if you will. The city was very supportive in our effort to obtain the ARPA funds, and one of the steps they did was to cover 50% of the cost of this study. And I believe the hope, of course, is that they will be open to those additional discussions about a partnership. I think we first approached them formally in 2019, and I think there may be some interest in that. So I'll certainly be attending the city council meeting this afternoon, as this is presented to the council. But as far as moving forward, we're optimistic that those conversations will take place, if you will, and that there'll be some interest. I will also mention in a recent meeting that I was part of with their city manager, John Holman, he mentioned having their city engineers help assist with the interchange design there at Trent, which would be very helpful and could save quite a bit. And as this is proposed, the facility is bordered by the city limits on 3 sides. So if we were to extend and connect into Trent, we would be traveling into Spokane Valley city limits across a small amount of property that we lease from state parks. I've initiated conversations with state parks. We like complicated, I guess. So we have a lot of steps to work through, but we have miraculously managed to do that and have a lot of great success stories as a result of it. So we don't have an immediate commitment right now, but there's certainly been interest shared, and hopefully those conversations would continue.
I've spoken with 5 of the 7 members. They're all in support of partnering with us in some aspect. They do not want full ownership of the park. There were some folks who kind of floated that idea, and that kind of lost some of the support, but I believe we are back to at least 5 members saying, yes, they want to partner with us in some aspect. We just need to kind of give them a proposal on what we're looking for.
Great.
And that's consistent with the meeting that Doug and I had with some of the team from the valleys. just informal meetings, talking about a partnership. We haven't talked specifics about it, what it would look like, what's the capital side, what's the operating cost side, but just trying to get some general understanding even from this board if that's a direction you want to go in and start to work on refining what a partnership agreement, what an interlocal agreement might be between the city and the county, knowing the proximity to the valley. It makes a lot of sense. I think they're seeing the connection and the economic impacts that it has on their city, being the primary recipient of those as well. So.
And then if we only do phase one, because that's what we have funding for, would we be bringing in the outside organization to manage that or continue managing it?
The recommendations, we would continue with the current agreement we have in place with the Spokane Valley Junior Soccer Association, and I believe is the recommendation is after we would complete the entire implementation that or when we're in process, that's when we would look at bringing on board a professional management company to come in and assist.
Thank you. Commissioner French?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So I believe all of us received an invitation from Representative Marcus Riccelli to join him in a meeting over in Seattle with regard to the International Football or Soccer Association and stuff. And I have indicated before that he's demonstrated a willingness to go to the legislature for funding for Plants Ferry and stuff. So would this be one of those projects that we might want to add to our wish list for capital funds from the state? And how does that impact, our ability to move forward and stuff? So just wanted to put that on the table as well. Thank you.
Yes, and I believe that meeting is here in Spokane that he sent to all of us. And I think that, if I'm not mistaken, is there other funding sources outside the capital, just the normal capital process for youth sports?
Yeah, depending upon the funding cycle and what the state has collected, there periodically have been grants that we've had some success with. We've not looked at that for phase one. I don't know that the timing would work in a way. I don't believe it would. We would pursue those next year, and if successful, funding would come in 25. And so that absolutely is something we might look at for phase 2A, phase 2B. For phase one, that the timing wouldn't play out correctly just in our need to be under contract next calendar year.
Okay, but for the additional phases?
Oh, absolutely. We would absolutely do that. And again, we're optimistic there's opportunity for partnership. Partnerships tend to be more effective at leveraging funding through various grant processes, state level, at least in what I've observed in my time. That can be very, very helpful, looking at the bigger picture.
I think that's one of the benefits now of having this master plan. We didn't really know what the what was until this has been developed to even know what does the partnership conversation look like? What does the future funding opportunities and needs look like? We know that we've got $5 million in ARP funds to do phase one. Based on the preliminary design estimates here, looks like we'll be short, and it doesn't include the offsite, right? The offsite access into it. So we now have some information, to Commissioner French's point, to be able to start leaning in for future planning with state and local funding, but more immediate. What does that partnership opportunity look like with the Valley to help not only think about ongoing operating costs, but also possibly the gap that we have right now in the capital?
Can you talk about the thought process and the timing of the three phases and why one is one and 2B is 2B and that analysis?
Yeah, I can take a right at that. I think one is one for ARPA, and our initial goal was, we were targeting our funding amount and wanting to maximize value and use and benefit with those funds. And the 2A and 2B, we have not set a time to it. From my perspective, that really that next step beyond working to make sure we utilize those funds in the best way possible for phase one or a portion of it is to really focus on that partnership. And I think through that partnership, once that is formed, we would collaboratively look at what that timing might be involved with, or how that may work out. And so I think it would be important to do that in with a collaborative approach. So I've myself have not tried to map anything out with that in mind as really being the priority and the recommendation.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
And now you get to stay for the next one, Doug.
Yeah, we've got a couple more, I've got a couple more items. I have folks that are queued up to come in and help me with golf fees next. All right. We have Kurt Chambers and Trish Truitt with the Parks team. They're in their golf hats today, which I enjoyed quite a bit of time. So shifting gears, they've put together a great presentation. We've invested quite a bit of time in looking at capital planning and rates for 2024. And so I will turn it over to Trish, and the two of them will go through this great presentation.
Okay, thanks for having us. I'll start with the capital planning. Just a reminder and in summary, golf is, the 3 golf courses operate as enterprise funds, and we created a capital plan with the goal to be more self-supporting for both operating and capital, ultimately minimizing the dependence on outside funding sources. We created a 20-year capital improvement plan, with the first 6 years being the most important and or helpful for us, with the goal of sustaining the existing conditions of the course and facility infrastructure, and while maintaining our capital equipment, all while maintaining the fund balance of 1.1 million. Next slide. The objective of our capital plan, while I worked with the 3 golf course superintendents, we assessed and planned for all the infrastructure on the golf course facility and golf playing surfaces. We based the timing of our plan on several items in no particular order: life expectancy, preventative maintenance, safety for patrons and employees, operational efficiencies, business modernization, and to maintain facility relevance within our market amongst our competition. And this slide shows the 6 years with our capital total as identified and the year-end fund balance. You can see that we've maintained a positive fund balance 6 years and beyond. And we feel in doing so, we've protected our investment, or we will be protecting the investment and the facility integrity, all while producing the expected high quality product that county courses have been known to deliver, and maintain competitive rates and users fees. Which we'll pass it over to Trish to talk about revenue and expenses.
Thank you. So moving on to golf rates. Prior to proposing a fee increase, golf courses in the area were surveyed. This slide provides a summary of weekend rates of area courses. On average, the county proposed golf rates are very competitive to the market and lower in some instances to our closest competitors. The average indicates we are about 9% below market. That's 7% below market on weekdays 11% below on weekends. The survey results were analyzed in combination with the projected 2024 operating expenses and future capital needs. The proposed rates before you are projected to cover increases in maintenance and operation costs, along with increasing salaries and extra help, and provide funding for capital improvements to properly and efficiently maintain our golf courses. Next slide, please. A simplified golf rate structure is proposed in response to patron feedback and market analysis of our direct competitors and other golf courses in the country. Market research indicates that we are out of sync with other courses in the area. We have more complicated and expansive offerings, and the goal is to limit those offerings to be more comparative to other courses. The proposed simplified rate structure emulates the City of Spokane's offering. It is easier to understand for patrons and provides a modern and more streamlined approach while offering 3 tiers of discounts or passes for customers to choose from based on their playing needs or how often they play. Some key changes include moving to one rate Monday through Sunday, replacing the 10, 30, 50 round loyalty discount cards with a loyalty pass and rate. Add an adult season pass, which has been requested in previous years. And eliminate offerings that represent less than 1% of rounds played. Next slide, please. The 2024 rate proposal includes a $2 to $5 rate increase on green fees. It proposes to increase the discount pass by $10. And again, replacing those 10, 30, 50 round loyalty discount cards with a loyalty pass for $300 and then green fees for $29 or $28 adult and senior. Next slide, please. Here's a look at the proposed 2024 rates. The regular 18-hole rate is proposed at $48, $38 for 18 holes if you have a discount pass. Adding that adult season pass is proposed at $2,400. The senior season pass is proposed at $2,300. And a twilight offer is proposed to be expanded to have all courses participate in the twilight offer and expand it to 7 days a week, where before it was just 2 courses that offered it on the weekend only. Twilight is up to 9 holes, 2 hours prior to sunset, and not all you can play for $25. Again, the primary drivers of the fee increase are to keep up with the rising costs of operations and ever-increasing capital needs while balancing rates with the local market. The proposed rates are projected to cover operating expenses and contribute towards equipment needs and capital improvements while continuing to be competitive within our market and a great value for the product we deliver. Next slide. Thank you for your time today. Any questions?
So what are the comparable rates of the city with the city courses, kind of the other courses around our area? Are they there?
Yeah.
Oh, the first slide I had was the weekend comparative rate, and then we do have a rate study that I can certainly share with everyone. If we go to maybe slide 5, if possible, or I have the rate study that I can pass along.
Okay.
So for example, the city
Sorry,
of
Trish, just a
Spokane.
second.
Oh, no, you're fine.
We're $48, they're 52.
Currently.
No, that's,
The city has proposed their 24 and approved their 24 rates. The other courses just had 23 rates available. So you'll see that the city does have their 24 rates. There'll be 52 This county is proposing 48.
Okay, thank you.
And then those other courses are 23 rates.
And so then the Gulf Advisory Committee, have they looked at all this and given their blessing to it?
Yes, the Gulf Advisory Committee met and they have unanimously recommended support of these rates for your consideration.
And then it's, yeah, I think it'll be nice just to have all three of our courses doing the exact same thing.
Yes, yeah, we sometimes will experiment like a pilot project, and so that was the case with the last couple hours of the day, and I think we initially worked with that at our Latah Creek course, then Liberty Lake, and then now it's worked well, so we're expanding that to our Meadowood course as well, and it does offer a lower cost option for individuals that might be interested in golfing 5 or 6 holes. As Trish mentioned, it's possible to get all 9 in, but typically it's less than that, and that can be just right for some folks. So even with the streamlined rate schedule, much more simplified, same rates, instead of having a different set 5 days a week than on the weekends, this is much more consistent with what we're seeing in the market. And yet we still are able to provide a lot of different affordable options depending upon what may work best for your budget. So we believe we've outlined a path that way. And it does look remarkably similar to the City of Spokane as far as structure, although ours are a little bit more, continue to be a little bit more competitive. But it is a little bit more of an increase than what we've typically seen year for year. And a big part of that is really that focus on capital improvements and trying to rely less on real estate excise tax assistance, where we still show some assistance there, but we're trying to reduce that as we go forward. So that's part of that increase as well.
Thank you.
And if this looks acceptable, we would have this a week from today on your legislative agenda for formal consideration. And again, we're happy to answer any questions or to delay that if there's any concerns. Great, thank you. And I think
Thank you.
I have my third and final item. Shift over here. And Mark Heineke, our planning development and real estate manager, is going to join me for this and has been helping quite a bit with our Conservation Futures program. And this particular item, we have a recommendation to amend the prioritized acquisition list to modify. Thank you, Ron. There we go. We've got our presentation up there. We've had a request. The first item here, our trolley trail, which is identified on the original 21 list that was adopted as an administrative acquisition. And that category focuses on a property that can help alleviate a long-standing condition or concern. It could be like a little additional property for a trailhead parking lot. It could help resolve a gap, address trespassing, reduce trespassing needs, and so forth. This particular property, again, during the overall original review, fell under that. But also at that time, there were some additional requirements or contingencies that were placed on this property that aren't ordinarily placed on properties. And I think at the time, it was at the direction of the nominators, and that is, next slide, please. Yeah, okay, we can start to see there's at the bottom of the slide is the northern end of the existing trolley trail. We'll have additional graphic that extends quite a bit south, but you'll see the subject property, there's the Vetch property. And the additional contingencies required the city to have easements in place to bridge the gap from the subject property to the northern existing conservation area. And at the time of nomination, conversations were going very, very well. They were very optimistic that could happen. A purchase and sale agreement is in place for the subject property there, the Vetch property. And what's happened though is the city has come back and there's been a change. That gap is represented by two different ownerships. And there's been a change in ownership for a portion of that gap. And so that will be the subject of the next item. And they're not in a position to accomplish that easement or trail extension the way that they had hoped. And then the second component of that, the conversations are going very, very well, but the concern is they simply can't complete that before, I believe it's December 28th is the deadline on the current purchase and sale agreement. So they've asked that these additional contingencies be removed so that they can proceed with and close on the subject property there and complete the purchase. Next slide, please. So there is a close-up, again, the administrative acquisition. That yellow outline represents one of the ownerships, then the purple and pink represents the other. The purple and pink continues to go well, but again, they expect it'll take them beyond December to complete that. And we'll talk more about the yellow, which is completely changed ownership, and the plat that was in process has expired. And so there's a new look there. Next slide, please. Oh, okay, I'll have you go back one, Ron. And so I'll stop here for the first item. The Land Evaluation Committee met on October 24th. They discussed this at length and felt that there was still significant value in completing the acquisition of that property, even if these additional contingencies were to be removed. And so they recommended unanimous in support of removing the additional contingencies to allow the city to proceed with and pursue closure or acquisition of the subject property there, identified in orange. And again, you can see how that on the northern end of the Vetch property, it connects to, I believe, a right-of-way or access that would ultimately terminate at their Grandview Park. Right, testing the magnification on my glasses here. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. Okay, and so that's the first of two recommended modifications to the prioritized acquisition list. Yes?
So I'm having a hard time just seeing where this actually is, I guess.
The Grandview Thorpe neighborhood.
But if you take the Garden View exit, you can get there off I-90, you can loop around and get to this.
Off of 195 as you're starting to travel.
So,
can
okay,
get
so
Or you can
195
probably
is
go that way
the
too.
north-south.
Yeah, 195 is just directly to the right of
Right.
that
Okay.
arrow within the circle. And that's I-90 there.
In the corner.
Okay.
And then that particular slide does a nice job of showing the full length of the existing trolley trail conservation property, the longer one. And again, as we move on the second one, I'll have an additional graphic that may help. Any other questions on this property? And there, yes.
So what's in between this property and Grandview Park? I see you've got a little green, in one of these, you have a green square and a little dotted orange line. What is that? Is that a road there? Is that, I mean,
That road size.
when you're,
It's right away.
so what is it
So it
though?
connects to the right of way there. So they have a pedestrian linkage to get to the Grandview Park.
So it's not a paved road that's like a trail or something, or what's currently there?
Grass.
Okay. It's just a strip of grass.
Yes, and again, they're looking
That's
to
maintained?
bridge the gap, so it's heavily well, they are having a lot of use on that. There's a lot of trespass on this property
It's a big
now
wooded-
because
wooded
it's part of
property.
that original trolley trail route. And the ultimate goal is to link it to the Grandview Park, but because they have the right of way there, I think it's more than anything showing the linkage is there through acquisition of this parcel.
No, I mean the green box with the orange dots.
Chris is showing us sort of Google Earth here.
Hard to tell.
It's in Grandview.
Is it the park?
Oh, is that 18th? 18th is an undeveloped right of way. It's a gravel road. It has been partially paved for about 200.
Okay, so
The rest of it is
okay,
just a dirt road.
so it's not a strip of grass.
No, it's a dirt road.
It's a dirt road.
road, okay.
Okay.
Thank you,
Okay.
I apologize.
Yeah, no problem. Okay.
Sorry, it's my first house. My first house was there.
Oh, you know it well.
Okay, so it's a street though.
It's a right of way.
It is but it is a road, right? Okay, I'm just,
It's not,
do houses front on it?
people drive on it.
Okay, so it's a road.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
It's very, very low. It's just a handful of neighbors.
Okay.
Not all the lots are developed.
All right. So we're cul-de-sacs, low traffic, but people live on, that's the street.
Yeah, and it's only paved for about the first 4 houses in, and that's newish. And then
Okay.
the rest of it's paved all the way out.
Okay.
Likely won't be, there's a lot of rock.
But there's some houses down there? Okay, all right.
And then the second item, which if you look here on this slide, the yellow area and you can see the trail route there. We're going to be talking about that area next. So next slide, please. Thank you. And so we also received with a change in ownership and an expiration of the plat with this site, there was a request to consider first ownership of the entire site, which the city is not interested in. They are absolutely interested in seeing the trail route again extend through there. This happens to be a graphic provided by the owner. The green route there is an example of what a desired trail route might look like if extended through here. And in considering this, we, at the staff level, we determined this would, similar to the Vetch property, would really fit the makeup and criteria intended for an administrative acquisition. And so the request was whether the program would recommend modifying the list to add this property on here and the ability to fund an acquisition of a trail route extension, either in land, fee simple title, or an easement, keeping both options available to help bridge the gap. The new owners of the property are open to this and interested in having that conversation. The plat, as you look at it there, is not improved. It's very likely that if it were to be redesigned or replatted at some point, it would likely access from the north end, assuming north is up in this photo, and extend through the site. Next slide. And again, here's we're looking at that potential trail route through the subject property. In this case is owned by the Hema Boys LLC. And the city is very interested in having the ability to pursue acquisition of that trail extension. It would, again, allow more control over the alignment and the route that could go through there and help complete that linkage. Next slide, please. And that's, this is one of my favorite graphics because again, it now shows that bigger picture. There really is quite a neat route that has been acquired and preserved there. And the Vetch property is that red one on the top. That, again, a purchase and sale agreement is in place, but if the contingencies, those special contingencies are eliminated, it'll allow that to go forward. The city is continuing and discussions on the green stretch there, and they feel very optimistic they'll be able to reach agreement. And this request would support and modify the list to allow them to pursue, as an administrative acquisition, the trail extension there in yellow. Next slide, please. And so translating this into an amended prioritized acquisition list, it would look exactly like this, where we would add that second one, the contingencies that were listed next to the top one under administrative have been eliminated. It would, of course, follow all other adopted policies and practice that are set in place in the program that are followed for any acquisition through the program. It just wouldn't have those additional requirements. And if approved, it would allow them, again, to pursue an extension through those parcels to extend that trail route. And at this time, we have the three other properties on the list that are ranked there in order. And the top one we recently, as you may recall, and we appreciate your support, we submitted for the TLT program. And so if the recommendation by the Land Evaluation Committee were to be approved, this is the updated amended list that would be put in place. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
I'm just gonna be straight, so when we look, I don't see the connection to Grandview Park. Grandview Park is a very neighborhood park. I don't see people driving using this Vetch property for parking or a trailhead and then walking. That's gotta be about half a mile from there to the park. I don't see people utilizing this to get to Grandview Park. Grandview Park has plenty of street parking that goes around at least two sides of it. And it's never, that I have seen, when I've seen, my father-in-law lives 2 blocks from there. Kind of thing. I don't see people utilizing this to get to Grandview Park. I don't think that's the kind of park that it's sort of a regional attraction that people are going to drive, park there and walk half a mile to get to, when they can have street parking much, much closer to Grandview Park. So can you tell a little more about Canyon Bluff LLC that owns the green line in the one? And I mean, you say the city is confident they can get that, but why haven't they gotten it yet? Because if we acquire this with Conservation Futures dollars and then the city can't close the deal on Canyon Bluff, then we got a pretty big gap in between that trail.
Okay, I will try to start with the question on the Grandview Park. And I think, like many trail routes, and this I believe is no exception, the city has been working towards acquiring and bridging these gaps for many, many, many years. And they're looking at that long range plan of having the trail connect to Grandview. And so I think the intent there is to show in the long range plan, we have the ability to do that, even though it's not improved as a trail right now. They do have some folks walking that route, but the connectivity exists. They wouldn't have to acquire additional property to provide that improved connection.
Walking the route from where, though?
The trolley trail route from the Vetch property. And
to get to Grandview Park?
Yes. Some folks, as was explained to us, really enjoy that. And again, they're looking at the long range vision of having an improved, some level of improved trail connect there, although it may not exist today.
But that final stretch is a road. It's not a trail. I mean, we keep referring to 18th Avenue as a trail. It's a road.
Pedestrian connectivity. So it could be, if the road were to be improved, you potentially would have sidewalks there that would link it to the Vetch property
Okay.
as a pedestrian corridor connectivity. And the green stretch there, I apologize, I can't read from here.
It's the Canyon Bluff
Thank you.
LLC is the.
Canyon Bluffs,
current owner.
again, they indicated they're making very good progress with that group, and they're optimistic that that will come together. I believe that group is allowing people to walk that stretch now, if I recall correctly. They indicated that in our group. They're really, really supportive, the owners, and so they're confident they will have that done, just not within a time frame that would allow closure of the Vetch property to happen. And again, I'm happy to arrange to bring city staff back if you would like more information. I'm happy to bring them back, and so they can speak directly to these properties. These would be under city ownership, and they are absolutely most familiar with the park and the pedestrian use that goes there. I'm more of a facilitator or a conduit in this case, and so I apologize that I feel like I'm not representing that as well as I could, or certainly if it were a county site that we work with every day. So I'm at a bit of a disadvantage, and apologize for not having all of the answers that I
No, I mean,
strive to.
don't apologize, because it is the city. I mean, because I agree, it's trying to figure out, as you know, it's like we've been very respectful of the list. And so to jump something up the list, we want to make sure.
Yeah, and as an administrative acquisition, these are relatively small dollar amounts, and we are projected to have adequate funding, and it would not impact the ranked properties on the list. So the Vetch one, for example, I think the total amount allocated is approximately $280,000. The purchase and sale agreement based on appraisal, the sale price is $250,000. The additional funds are for environmental and survey and so forth. So we're estimating that the HEMA boys could be similar to that, just based on the Vetch property.
Yeah, my concern with the HEMA Boys one is that since they've platted these, even though it's expired plat, correct? Is that what
Yes,
you're
it's an
saying?
expired plat, and they would have to effectively go back and start over.
I'm just, it's like once you see all those potential lots, to then give up that, because you would definitely be giving up some of those lots.
I think they have, again, major issues with access is what the city described,
So it
and
might be
why
good-
they're open to selling this trail route through there before, which then they would design it. There would need to be an easement across it, like we see at some points on the Centennial Trail, where there may be a bollard and vehicles could potentially cross a section.
So, I would say it might be good to have the city
Okay.
come in.
Yeah,
I mean, I
you
don't know
bet.
if a week is a big deal to delay.
I think it's most important that we have the information you need for a decision. And so I'm happy to bring them back. We will look at doing that.
Just because I know like that, the Fancher property on the list, that's number one on the list. I know these are smaller compared to that, but it's still money that gets taken away.
Oh, of course, absolutely.
From those projects, and that the Fancher project has been a long time.
Oh, yeah. Yes, definitely.
So
And
I
that
mean,
was-
I've had a lot of.
We've been criticized for spending a whole lot less than $280,000.
I understand.
It may be relatively small in the grand scheme of
Yeah.
things, but people still care about it.
But the Fancher is, I still get emails. It's
Oh,
been a little
yes,
while,
yes.
people that are like,
And I
you
think-
keep saying you're gonna do this, and now it's finally up on the list at the top, and then we're gonna jump, there's just a lot of citizens that pay
Oh,
attention to this.
yes, and again, as an administrator, it's not prioritized higher, if you will, but it's thought that it could happen
Sooner.
simultaneously with. It would not alter our efforts towards the Fancher property in any way. And so that was certainly a topic of discussion at the meeting, and I believe part of their willingness to and desire to recommend in support of this. They're very supportive of seeing the trail continue and to bridge those gaps, and felt that there was a relatively high value benefit for comparatively reasonable cost to some of the larger projects and acquisitions that we've done.
No, which I appreciate that, and I do think, you know, if the reality of the trail is a reality, I think it's a good thing, I guess. Yes, it'd be nice to have the city come
Okay.
and discuss it a little bit more.
We will, I'll work to arrange that and be happy to bring him back.
Scott?
I just wanted to confirm a couple things for the commissioners and myself. The Vetch property was on the 2021 conservation list with an amount there that we feel like can be fully satisfied with this potential PSA. The Hema Boys was not on the list, correct? That's now coming forward as an unforeseen opportunity.
It's an administrative acquisition, yes, an unforeseen administrative acquisition.
And they've got a expired plat that looks like they've done some renderings of a new plat that they'd have to go forward.
That's actually an expired plat, or as it exists. That's
okay.
what was so confusing to me.
But the
is
route
it appears
through
to be
it,
platted, but it's not developable in the current situation that
the
you looked at.
anticipated route through it would go along roads that they had planned. It's not like this would just cut right across the potential plat. Anyhow, I just want to make sure that the additional one, the Hema Boys, it would be a new ad on the conservation futures.
Yes, it would be a new one. It was one that before the plat failed and expired, they felt they would otherwise be able to negotiate something. And at this point with the new ownership, and again, it is very confusing because when I saw, well, it's platted and what's been shared is it's not developable in the current platted form, and that's why they're open to selling the trail route and coming in and doing an all new design around that or with that in mind. And so it is a bit confusing for sure. Okay, well, thank you for your time, and I will work to bring our friends from the city back to help provide more additional information on this.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you.
It's gonna take us to Kyle. And then,
Very integral part of that conversation.
I was here, in case you needed me.
Good job.
I almost jumped in the last one.
there you go.
It's good to see you guys.
Good to see you too. And then just so you guys know, I have a 12:15 meeting that I've got to leave at noon that we tried to build into the schedule, but it's gone crazy. So there it goes. Yeah.
Okay. We'll do our best.
Oh no, you're good. It's just what it is.
So good afternoon, not afternoon yet. Still good morning, everybody. We have 3 items to brief this morning. The first is Deb Geiger's item, and this is with regards to our interlocal agreement with the city of Spokane for solid waste disposal. And we think we touched on this a little bit when we talked about our rates, but this is the actual ILA coming forward. So I'll allow Deb to walk you through the changes in this new agreement.
Yes.
Or amended agreement, apologize, it's not new.
Good morning, I'm back again, yes. Just to kind of give you a real quick refresher, in 2014, when the county took over the transfer stations in the regional system, the city still had an ongoing contract for disposal at the landfill for not only trash that's bypassed, but for their ash. And so the county entered into an interlocal in 2014 with the city and has amended it several times since then to have the city provide for that disposal to the landfill through their contract. Recently, last year, the city's contractor for disposal did some service fee adjustments and increased their pricing, which sort of forced the city's hand to go out for an RFP for our disposal contract for only a year to get some competitive pricing. And so the city's getting ready to enter into that contract with Waste Management for a year of disposal. And we need to change our interlocal because it specifically he points out a different contractor at a different price. So we're amending our interlocal agreement with the city for 1 year. And the reason we're doing it only for 1 year at this point is we're trying to kind of get everything to date at the same time. We've got all these agreements and they all end in these different times. We're trying to get everything to coincide with our contract at the transfer station, something different. And so that's next November. So with this interlocal agreement, what we've done is kind of basically we've flipped a little pricing. You can see on that graph up on the table. Currently this year at the Waste to Energy, we're being charged $57.07. And for our bypass rate through the city's contract, we're being charged $65. This is per ton. What we intend to do with our interlocal agreement with the city is sort of flip those costs, $65 a ton to the Waste to Energy facility. And through their contract with Waste Management, it will be $58.95 a ton. See the little blue marks, kind of ignore those. Those are transport fees and they're not quite accurate. Those were already locked into with our contract with Waste Connections. They won't change. So basically what you're seeing is rate per tons changing for a year. And if you figure out the costs on what our average tonnage is, we'll be paying an additional $182,000 next year. I think that's about it. The only other part of this resolution, we found a mistake in the previous resolutions with the city done in 2014. There was no actual indication that they were intending to let this county do comprehensive solid waste management planning. So we made sure we got that into the current agreement.
Tim, is the 65,000 indicative of what we anticipate 2023 to net, or are we showing some decline for 2024?
You know, that was just sort of a guesstimate we use in a model. I know it's a little off. I believe last year and this year is going to be around 22,000 tons. So that is off a bit.
So just it's a constant game of little model adjustments, things like that. But what we do see is just with general growth, the Waste to Energy, they in essence take their waste first, right? So we could see that percentage change a little bit. Maybe our tonnage goes up a little bit, maybe it doesn't, but it might turn into 60 and 60 instead of 65 and 55. Just depends on what they see, where the big construction activity is occurring, what's going through there. So those are always estimates, but it's a rough idea of the net impact. For a year of CPI increases, it's a pretty reasonable adjustment in our opinion.
Questions? Commissioner French?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Deb, does this, how does this formula get impacted if in fact the city becomes subjected to the carbon tax to this rate structure?
No, that's a very good question, and we will actually, we don't know exactly. We want to see what happens. We will be spending this next year working on a new agreement with the city regarding our disposal at the Waste to Energy.
Okay.
Oh,
Thank
that's
you.
true. And we don't expect it to impact next year in 2024 if the carbon tax does go through. It'll be at a later date.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Doesn't look like it.
All right. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
See
you.
this coming for you next week. Okay, our next item, I think Ben's here. We have Ben Bradabo here coming to join us. He's our program manager for water resources here. We're going to talk a little bit about our stormwater management service rate charges.
Thank you. Ben Bradabo, and then Bill Galley is the stormwater utility manager, and here to questions. So I have a couple slides to go over today to talk about a proposed stormwater fee increase. And so looking at our rates, they haven't been adjusted since 2007. And let me go to the next slide, Ron. Our rates are collected across our sewer or our stormwater service area. They were last adjusted in 2007. We have a rate study that's going on right now, and we anticipate that that'll be completed in late 2024. Hopefully in 2024, we'll see the timing of any recommendations that come out of that. But in the meantime, what we're here today to do is request a interim increase of $5 per equivalent residential unit increase of the stormwater service fees to be collected next year on property taxes. So there's a table there that shows the rates. Our general service area at the bottom would go from $21 to $26, and then the three special areas that we have that have increased services would also increase $5 per equivalent residential unit. And that's essentially to catch up to where we are. We anticipate that the rate study will recommend additional increase, and so this would be kind of that first step into what may be a larger increase. We go to the next slide, please. The graphic on the right represents what the current stormwater utility rates are in Eastern Washington for a monthly fee, which gets rolled up into an annual fee. But you'll see the green lines on the left are where we are today. And then the $5 increase takes us to then the second lowest head only of ours. And then the orange is the special fee area, and then there's a blue and a yellow, also kind of in the middle of the pack for stormwater service fees. So maintenance costs are increasing. We do a lot of inspection reporting to the state under permit requirements. Illicit discharge prevention, so a lot of activities going on, and our rates haven't been adjusted for quite some time, so we're interested in increasing them at this time. And then there's one final slide is a graphic, is the stormwater service area around Spokane County. It's the yellow area is the stormwater service area. The purple area is what's our permitted area, so they're not one and the same. And the green area are municipalities, so those aren't part of ours. Our rate study will also look at changing that service area boundary. So there'll be a couple things coming next year related to that. And so our intent is to have a notice of hearing next week to set the hearing date for November 28th to request that increase of $5 per ERU. Any questions or additional information we can provide, I'd be happy to do that.
Any questions for Ben? No. Nope. Looks like we're good.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I think we're sticking with Ben for this next one.
We also have Derek Villar with us. He's our project manager that handles everything Newman Lake for the most part, and other duties as assigned. And Kiefer's here to join us as well. And thanks, Ron.
Wow, that's.
Oh, Chief, come on, Ron. That's so. Yes, happy Halloween. Put your phone down, Chris.
Which one's the zombie?
Yes.
He was about to say.
Next slide, Ron. That was Washington Filmworks Day in Olympia. What year? 2012, 2013, something like that. And those are cast members from Z Nation. Yes, the famed Z Nation. Yes.
So you made it out alive.
That has been a lot. That has been many a memes over the years by Ron. So. Looks nothing like me. I don't have a beard.
Yeah. So then the next topic, thanks, is this is an annual process for the Newman Lake Flood Control Zone assessments, and so this is setting the assessments, and then give an opportunity for Board of Equalization for people to comment on the rolls as they're distributed. So this is standard process. The Board of County Commissioners approved the district budget for next year earlier this month, and we didn't change the amount to be assessed from the district properties from last year to this year. There's 1,700 parcels within the district, and of those, about 770 pay assessments. So there's a lot of properties in the district that are not of a benefit class where they pay. So they're in the district but don't have to pay any fees. And so then there's assessments ranging from $2 to about $3,000. And we made the determination that undeveloped parcels designated in forest land and agriculture are exempt from district assessments. So that's a bit of a change from what we've done in the past. And so then the plan here is to have a notice of public hearing November 7th, with the public hearing then on December 12th. We'll advertise that and let people know that's available. The next slide is a summary of the assessed values, and this is a similar graphic, or definitely an eye chart, but this is just the distribution of, and actually the next slide is a bit more information. Most properties are assessed less than $100, and then it goes up to the high end, up to about $1,400 on the right. There's a few properties that have that, and those are for the most part, are the most valuable lakefront properties, residential properties. Any questions on the Board of Equalization?
Nope, doesn't look like it.
Thank you.
These folks will be here for an executive session following this, so.
Okay.
Stick around close by.
All right, and then miscellaneous, we have Jeff. Did you want to go? Oh, want to go now or later? To you.
Just to go before 2 o'clock.
Okay.
2 o'clock.
Go for it. You're up.
So this is pretty quick. You guys will recall, we had a conversation a few weeks ago about ARP money being used as the required match for the disaster recovery efforts. So you have 4 resolutions on the 2 o'clock agenda today to that effect. One is moving the $10,000, you'll recall the Paterra that went to Medical Lake. There were indirects to deal with there. The Historic Flight Foundation, which due to the bankruptcy and issues, there's $220,000 there, plus the $22,000 of indirects that goes with that. Then the town of Fairfield had completed their project and been reimbursed. The construction firm said due to some contingency issues, they returned $5,681 and change. So we also put that $5,681 and then the $568, 10% that would go with it. So those are 3 resolutions, that's removing money from previous allocations for a grand total of $258,249.94 that will be put into the new category, emergency relief from natural disasters. And that's all on your 2 o'clock today, unless there's concerns.
Any concerns, questions?
Sounds
Okay,
good.
good to go.
We're all good? Thank you.
Record time.
Okay, any other miscellaneous items before executive sessions? Commissioner French.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to give fellow commissioners an update. I've been working with the Spokane Historic Preservation Group that we have a partnership with between the city and the county and Eastern State Hospital and Medical Lake. And we are going to be submitting today a grant application for grant funding targeted for theatrical purposes. Eastern State Hospital has, interestingly enough, a theater structure that was built in the early 1900s. And that theater structure is a great asset, but under utilized and in need of tender loving care. So the grant application is for $75,000 to do patchwork for the roof and get it at least water secure, and then also to do a structural analysis on the building and put together a rehab. The building is basically the Fox Theater in a much reduced size. It has a theater stage, a slope floor, foyer, probably could accommodate somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 to 500 people. And this would could be used not only for the Eastern State Hospital in terms of educational purposes for people that are going into therapeutic profession, but also Eastern Washington University is looking at their theatrical program and expanding that. The High School for Medical Lake has also got a drama program. They could use the facility, and the facility could also be a community facility for Medical Lake. And so just wanted to give you a heads up that we are pursuing this, and we'll ultimately working with remnants from the Friends of the Fox and other historic preservation groups to try and bring new life to this facility that will serve interest in the West Plains. So just kind of a heads up, not asking for anything yet. No, not asking for anything. Just want to let you know that we're pursuing that. We have been working with Gil and ultimately we'll be working with Bruce and stuff to tap into their expertise as well. That's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, how many executive sessions?
I believe we only have one for this morning, and then we have a few set for this afternoon as well.
Okay, so the purpose of the first one?
This one is going to be for pending potential litigation pursuant to 42-3110-1I of the RCW.
Okay.
Those involved in this one would be the board, CEO Scott Simmons, myself, Kyle Tuig, Ben Bradgo, Derek Villar, Kiefer Stenzing, and Ron Valencia. It should take approximately 10 minutes and no action.
Okay, 10 minutes. Commissioner French?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would also like to entertain a pending or potential litigation item, no more than 5 minutes. And that could include the board, our executive team, Mr. Anderson, and no action to be taken.
All right, sounds good. All right, so total of 15 minutes for the purposes stated. Right now, it is 12:14, so it'll take us about a minute to get into executive session, get all the computers going. So we will be done at 12:30. At that point, we will not be returning to open session, and we will reconvene at our 2 o'clock consent agenda.